My name is Bismarck Lepe. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Wizeline. How did we overcome it? So we overcame it by having to change the CEO. So I was the founder CEO. The business was growing well, but we needed to raise capital. And so I went and I met with over 160 investors. They all said no. And so I knew that the business was healthy. I knew that the market was right and ready for our solution. So the only thing I could do was change the CEO, change the mouthpiece that was delivering the message. And so I went and I hired and recruited this person who had been a public company CEO. He had been an executive. He looked the type. He was, he's 6'3", tall, full head of hair. He had been a football player. And so I hired him. And sure enough, we went to 3 meetings with investors and we received a term sheet and it saved the company. One of the things that I think has helped us or has helped me throughout the fundraising process is that we work with this amazing graphic and motion visual designer. And we would have the most realistic demos and videos of the platform we were going to build that helped us sign early customers, early partners, and definitely investors. Because many of these investors wouldn't even ask, is this real? Because it just looked so realistic that of course it was real. They're like, oh yeah, sure, I'd love to invest, even though the platform hadn't actually been built. And so that I think, being the best storyteller, I think, is the best way to hire people, to get venture capital, to get early customers. But if you can actually put together a video of the product in action, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words and a video's 30 frames per second. So, 30,000 words per second, which is pretty powerful. So in 2008, with the economic downturn, we had a board meeting summer of 2008, and I asked my investors, so how am I doing? Is there anything I can be doing better? And no, you're doing great. This is fantastic. This was August of 2008. Then October comes around, and the bottom falls out of the market, and our investors come to me and say, you know what, we haven't seen this in 80 years. We don't know what's going to happen. I think we need to get a professional CEO, someone who's been there, done that. And I'm like, you're the investors, you know best. And so we wasted a lot of time interviewing people who just weren't very good, who didn't have the experience, who had never been CEOs, who didn't have startup experience. And in the end, I think most of these people, if any one of them had moved into the role, they would have destroyed the company. They would have burned through capital. We wouldn't have been able to release products on time. And so it took me 3 months to finally push back with the investors and tell them, no, we're not able to hire the caliber of people or person that we need to hire for this role. And then there were a lot of other cases in the way that we hired or managed the team, or we looked at our competitors or partnerships, and the board is not there to operate. And if you have a board or investor that's trying to operate, as the CEO, you need to take a strong stance and tell them to stop. Our first meeting, and it was with DFJ in the Silicon Valley. This was the first meeting with an institutional investor. And we had already gone through the prep work of speaking with Tim Draper, and he was excited about the idea. And we go and we present. And we had a 45 slide deck, and we didn't even get through the first 5 or 6 slides. And so everybody in the room had absolutely no idea what we were doing. And so 3 hours later, Tim Draper calls me and says, so my firm is going to pass, but if it's okay, can I provide some advice? And he gave me the format he's like, look, this, from my perspective, is the ideal format and flow for a pitch. You start with the team and experience and why you're different and why you're special. Then you go to the problem that the market is facing and how large it is. Then you jump into the product and how you're solving it. Then you talk about kind of the business model or the expected business model, and you give us an idea of how and where you're going to make money, but that, you don't need to give very clear projections. He's like, if it's 10 slides, it's probably already too long at this stage in the game. We were in downtown Palo Alto. I was going to go buy some computers for new employees, and we had another VC pitch that afternoon. And at first I thought that the VC pitch was in the Silicon Valley. And about 45 minutes before it, I realized that it was all the way in San Francisco. And so San Francisco is about 45 miles away from Palo Alto. And so we were breaking several laws, speed laws, trying to get there. But I was sitting in the back, changing the entire flow of the pitch. And we went in and we delivered this new pitch using this flow that Tim Draper told me about. And that was the first term sheet that we got from an institutional investor. And we didn't end up taking it, but it set the benchmark. And the valuation was now 3 times higher than what it was just 8 months earlier or 7 months earlier than when we did our seed round. And it allowed us to go into other venture capital pitches more confident because we already had one. I don't know if we would have been able to raise capital, or maybe it would have taken longer if we hadn't received that feedback from Tim Draper. So now I've become a big believer in building profitable businesses. And so I think it's important to try to get to profitability as quickly as possible. And it's important to raise enough money to get to profitability as quickly as possible. And given AWS, given the ability to have a distributed team, I think it's a lot more doable now than it used to be. And so I think the cost of getting up and running and getting early data points is much easier. And so I think in the really early stages, it's about getting to the data points you need to be able to go out and raise the round that should get you to profitability. Now, if the business is growing incredibly fast, I think it's important to invest in growth and not try to be profitable and go out and raise another round of capital, because investors, the only thing they care about is growth. Like, you need to find the metrics that speak to growth. And it's about, if it's one customer, it's about how you're growing within the organization. If it's a consumer-driven application, it's how quickly you're growing organically. If it's an advertising business, it's how many impressions you're growing and how you're filling those impressions. Once you're coming up with a plan to get to profitability, I would say that whatever money you need, you double it, and that's what you raise, because you're always going to be wrong. You're always going to be wrong. We ultimately raised $8.5 million in that institutional round, and we got an additional $3 million in venture debt. So we raised, $11.5 million. We got within 3 days of running out of money when the next round happened 2 years later. But that round ended up being a down round, right? And so our investors, the entrepreneurs, the employees got diluted more than we should have. But we went from not being able to raise money to being able to raise money at a valuation that was pretty close to our last round. And so I think if we would have had another quarter or another 2 quarters, the economy would have been better. We would have had more proof points, and it wouldn't have been a down round. It could have been a pretty significant up round from the prior one. And this cost our investors, our employees, the founders, tens of millions of dollars, not raising enough, because we thought, all right, this is good, this will get us to profitability. But if we had raised even $5 million more, we would have been in a much better place.